All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to True Crime Loser. I hope you're doing well. So, folks, today we're going to break down the interrogation of old Wendi Adelson. Couple things that blow my mind about this interrogation. Wendi knew she was going to have to do it months before she actually had to sit down in a little white room across from a homicide detective and pull off the truly impossible performance with the audio and visual equipment rolling right in her face. Imagine the anticipation if you knew you had to do that in a month or two. I wouldn't be able to sleep or eat or have one moment of peace because I'd be thinking, I'm going to look like a total idiot. I'm going to go down in flames. There's no way. I'm going to have to fake cry. It's going to be a disaster. We're not doing this. Let's just see how we fare with the divorce. I know we all hate Dan, but I'm not going to go in there and take a total beating and have them record it and try to fake cry and do the whole thing. No, are you guys kidding me? But the Adelsons, they're all around the kitchen table planning this thing out. We're going to do it. We're going to kill Dan. And Wendi, once it gets to that certain point, you're going to have to get in there and deliver the performance of your life. But Wendi, who is clinically bats crazy, people like that, they're only aware of their strengths that would help them in that situation. So I'm sure Wendi was thinking, I'm intelligent. I can lie as naturally as I can breathe. I'm charming. I have a little bit of humor. I have looks. I can bat my crazy blue eyes at him. I think that I can do this. But she's totally unaware of her weaknesses, which are described perfectly by her ex-boyfriend Jeff in one of his interrogations, where he goes, she doesn't have the impulse control not to say something, especially when she gets stressed out. And Wendi talked about it a lot too, saying, I don't handle confrontation well. I avoid it. I end up saying the wrong thing when the stakes are high, so I just avoid it, and so I don't end up saying something stupid. It's like, Wendi, you didn't think that the fact that you melt during confrontation and end up saying stupid things and going on like a rambling moron might be a deal breaker in signing up to do a 6-hour interrogation with a homicide detective? How'd you miss that? It's quite a bit of a blind spot. Another thing that blows my mind about this interrogation is Wendi's free. I think this is the only interrogation we've talked about on this channel where the person is just out living their lives. She's in Florida. Hi, I'm Wendi. And I was thinking, you think she goes on YouTube? Hey, I'm going to look up a recipe for taco salad. And what if the algorithm recommends her own interrogation? Huh! Or what if her sons, which I think are approaching ages 14 and 16, so they're getting to that age, it's all going to click. Where's grandma? It's all going to click soon, and they're at the age where they're going to watch whatever they want to watch. Imagine Wendi's in the kitchen cooking and she hears her interrogation on the iPad in the other room. Mom, okay, that's enough screen time for today. Pretty unimaginable spot that the Adelsons and Wendi are in at this current moment. But let's break down this interrogation. So, I talked about it in the last video. The call comes in that Dan was shot in the face. 2 hours later, they locate Wendi eating at a restaurant with a couple friends and ask her to come down. It's so early on in the whole thing that the detectives are just happy to have somebody as ingrained in Dan's life as Wendi so she can answer a million questions for him. Yes, they have to get all of the information so they can check her off, but there's not too much pressure. There's basically no pressure from the interrogators the whole time because they don't know. They just want to get all of the information so they can say, okay, that checks out. That checks out. That kind of doesn't. Let's go that direction. So there are times where I wish where Wendi gets awkward and starts to look pretty crappy, a little bit guilty. And I wish a little bit that they kind of let her off the hook. They say, that's okay, that's all right. But I think the strategy in that and letting her off the hook and not pressing, even the times where it sounds really bad, is listen, we got the ex-wife in here. The more she's talking, the more she can tell us about different parts of Dan's life, the better, because the clock is ticking for the investigators and they need to get a lead and they need to get going quick. So there isn't that much pressure, but there's a few times where it does feel like an interrogation where they ask a question and they're waiting for the answer. Okay, that's the answer. Okay, that's noted. But let's start at the very beginning. They pull her in. She's at lunch with friends. Yeah, I'll come down. And they put her in the interrogation room. While she's sitting in there alone, she listens to a voicemail from a friend saying, I saw that there was something really bad going on Trescott. That's the street where Dan lived, where it happened. I wanted to see if you were okay. You know, I hope nothing but the best for you. But then the interrogator comes in and Wendi goes, I listened to my voicemail. And the interrogator goes, what did you hear? So this interrogation actually kind of starts at a intense moment. A lot of interrogations, it takes an hour, but right off the bat, the interrogator is going, what did you hear in the voicemail? Because if she knows about the shooting, there better be a really good explanation of why she knows. Because unless you're a part of it and planned it for months with your psycho family, you shouldn't know about it. And so it's a very what did you hear on the voicemail? And she goes, okay, well, it's just right here. And they listen to it together, and it's the friend. And so any strategy that the interrogator could use about laying the big news on her and watching the reaction, which has got to be, from Wendi's standpoint, that's one of the hardest moments, right? Because you go in there and then they say, your ex-husband was shot and he's alive barely and he's going to pass away. She's got to nail a realistic reaction to be told that news, and it's tough. I don't know. Do you think she practiced in her car? Oh my God, yeah! I don't know. That sounded pretty crappy. Oh my God. That's not right. I mean, you only get one shot and you gotta nail it. And so I think she has this thing where she went down, drove by Trescott. They had the alibi and everything that she was doing to get her checked off as a suspect, but then she sort of drove by the crime scene, and it's like, why? Why would you do that? And what I think it is I think she wanted to lessen the surprise. Same as the voicemail. So it doesn't have to go from, I have no idea what's going on at all, to all of a sudden your ex-husband was murdered, the father of your children, and then it's an even bigger. So I think she was trying to lessen the surprise, and then that would make her reaction easier. I'm not quite sure. But the first question is, or first he tells her, your ex-husband was shot and it's really bad. And she goes, oh my God. And her reaction is, I would give it a 6 out of 10. She goes, oh my God. But then there's one sound where she goes, ah, and it sounds a little bit like an amateur actor faking an orgasm. Like if I was the director of that scene and it was actors and she did that, the actor playing the detective told her the bad news and the actress playing Wendi went, ah, I would say, all right, cut. Listen, not bad for the first one. Not bad at all. But Wendi, maybe channel more your children just lost their father and all the bleak realities that entails. Try to channel that a little bit more and a little bit less you just came in your pants. All right, but not bad for the first one. Let's do it again. Take 2. And so Wendi has 2 modes during this interrogation, which it always is more simple than it should be if she didn't do it and this was all just real and she was an existing person. She has the crying hysterically and borderline hyperventilating, which I think she puts a lot of her acting chops into, a lot of thoughts into, but so much thought goes into making sure there's enough crying and it's realistic and all of that she sort of forgets to put thoughts into her other mode, which just happens to be everything is hilarious. So she's either crying and hyperventilating, or she's at the end of every sentence, she starts laughing. Like my son's broke the TV. And it starts to look really insane as the whole thing goes. And later in the interrogation, I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but they bring one of her friends in, and when she tells the friend that Danny's been pretty much murdered, the audio isn't that great and the visual is blurry, but it sounds like, I guess they're crying, but it sounds like they're laughing hysterically. It's a strange manipulative tactic that you see all the time where people, what she's doing is she's gauging where the interrogator, because if she goes, my son's broke the TV, and the interrogator laughs back, that's kind of funny, then she goes, okay, he's with me, I'm manipulating him. But if she goes, my son's broke the TV, and the interrogator just goes, they did, then she goes, oh, I better turn it up a little bit. But it makes her just look crazy because she's just laughing the whole time. She's going, I'm really sad. I really am. I'm really sad. Okay, so tells her the news. She does her cry that kind of sounds like an orgasm. And then we get to the first question. And it is, can you tell me what time you left your house this morning? So that's the first official question. And her first official answer is, yeah, I was there. I didn't leave this morning. I didn't leave until noon. Oh my God. And I tried to drive down Trescott, but it was blocked off. I thought maybe there was some trees down. Okay, so people pointed out in the comments that she said, I didn't leave this morning. I didn't leave until noon. And so does somebody that didn't know that it happened and planned it for months, maybe they would have just said, what time did you leave this morning? About noon. But she's going, I didn't leave until noon. Oh my God, I tried to drive down Trescott, but it was blocked off. I thought maybe there was some trees down. She's talking about maybe some trees were being down. It could have been a one-worded answer. You know it's not a good sign when your answer has more words than a Dr. Grande joke. It's a little bit wordy there, Wendi. But anyway, I don't know how much you can pull for it, but she definitely said, I didn't leave until noon. What do you mean until noon? But who knows what you can pull from that. And then the detective's like, okay, well then when you left, what did you do? And this is the point where she went to a liquor store to buy some Bullet bourbon for a stock the shelf party she was planning to go to later this afternoon. I mentioned this on the last video, but hilariously, not sure why, Wendi thinks it's a strategy to just not say stock the bar. I don't know if she thinks if they think that I say bar, then I'm guilty, or if I'm a drinker, then I did it, but she just goes, yeah, I got invited to a fill the space on the flat thing that's attached to the wall party, and she just, every time she has a different name for it. It's like, just say stock the bar. I don't know. And so she goes, I left at 12:15. I went and bought some, she pronounces it Bullier bourbon. Then she goes and gets gas. Then she went and bought some super glue. So what this is she's just going to places that has cameras that she can use her credit card. It's all going to be nice and laid out in electronic records. And then they get to talking about the TV repair guy, which, as the Adelsons are planning this out, all right, we need an alibi that morning. We need realistically that Wendi was home. At first, actually, Wendi planned to go on a trip, her ex-boyfriend said in his interrogation. So the first plan, he actually even bought the plane tickets. They were going to be out of town. Probably would have been better, but I think all of a sudden, the ex-boyfriend was saying, all of a sudden she was like, no, I need to be there that day. I need to be there Friday. I can't do it. We can't go on the trip. He's like, all right. And I think what it was is she was picturing not being there on the day that her family killed Dan. And then the boys not only lose their father, but she's out of town. I think even though it would have been easier for her, I was out of town. I went on a trip, but I think she wanted to be around for her boys. But So they plan for, okay, the alibi in the morning. What happens is, let's get the TV repair guy out there from Best Buy. They always tell you a big window. It means she has to be home. They keep records of their visits. It's not a bad one. The problem is, and someone pointed this out on my last video, who fixes these new flat screen TVs? I bet the TV repair guy thought it was such a bizarre visit, because you go out there, he's like, all right, yeah, you could probably fix these TVs, but I don't think anybody does. And then immediately she's just like, nah, we're going to buy a new one anyway. Hey, thanks for coming. He's like, all right, well, see you later, wacko lady. But he left a little early. And so this is the one moment that I think proves that Wendi was totally in the know. She was part of the whole planning, because the repair guy leaves at 10. Oh, God. And then she has to fill up emailing and working on papers and saving them, and she has to make sure there's enough electronic records on her cell phone and on her computer and the whole thing to keep the alibi going, because the TV repair guy left early. Okay, so they're going, I went to the liquor store. She goes, I talked to the guy. He complimented me on my blue eyes, which Wendi manages to bring up how blue and pretty her eyes are, I think 4 times during this interrogation. And then, did I mention I have beautiful blue eyes? Well, let me mention it again. And so she's talking about how the guy at the liquor store complimented her eyes, and she just goes through her story. The TV repair guy, then I ran some errands, and then I met some people at lunch. It's all a little bit wordy, but it's pretty dang smooth. But think about it. That first section, which is, what's your story, Wendi? When did you leave your house? Tell me everything about today so we can possibly mark you off. For a lot of the interrogations we've done where the person actually does it, that did the crime, that's doing the interrogation and didn't hire a hit, that's the rough section, because you get to a point where you can't explain exactly where you were when the crime occurred, because you did it. But when you hire a hitman, the way the Adelsons did it and meticulously planned for Wendi to be okay when they look into everything, that section is actually not all that bad. You just have to she just had to tell her story consistently, believably, don't flub anything big. Don't change it the next time you tell it, and she's pretty comfortable lying. She's using her manipulative laughing. Are you with me? But the next section is, who do you think would do this? And so this is actually the section that gets a little bit challenging for Wendi, because all of the questions in this section, like, was there anybody that really hated Dan? Well, that's the Adelson family. Did he owe money to anybody? He owed money to Wendi. Did anybody want him gone? The Adelsons. Every one of those questions. And so, how does Wendi deal with that? Not all that great, to be honest with you. And she first starts by going, Danny tried to mean well, but pretty much everybody hated him. And they're going, okay, did he owe anybody money? Well, he owed me money. And she's just trying to make it sound absurd. Like, yeah, like we hated him and my family was mad at him and he owed me money. But no, not in a million years would we do something like this. And in this interrogation, Wendi tries to send the police on two different directions away from her family. One was Danny's new girlfriend, who was an NY law professor and was the heiress to some crazy fortune. So Dan kind of upgraded after Wendi. He had this great girlfriend that he liked, is super rich, and Wendy's life didn't quite kick off the way that Dan's did once they separated. But she's going, or the interrogator asks, was there any cheating with your guys' relationship? And she goes, no. And then this is her first time where she tries to pin the whole thing on someone else. She said, No, but the only thing I'm thinking is Amy. I don't know what Amy's old divorce situation is like. So if you're going to think of somebody who's not thrilled with Danny, I don't know how happy her husband or ex-husband is with the situation. And they don't bite all that much. She's trying kind of the whole time, going, yeah, you better check out his new girlfriend's ex-husband. And they want to know, so do you know anything about him? And she goes, no. Picture that guy watching this interrogation, her going, you might want to check out the ex. He's going, what the hell? What is this lady talking about? So she tries to pin it pretty much immediately, right at the beginning, and then slowly throughout on Dan's new girlfriend's ex-husband. And then the other person she tries to really frame is her ex-boyfriend, Jeff. I talked about it on the last video, but during the planning of the hit, they really wanted to time it so her ex-boyfriend, Jeff, drove by, so his cell phone record put him near the house right when it happened, and then he was headed out of town. And I would bet money that Wendi in her head leading up to this interrogation, had the thought, you know what, I'm going to quickly, at the beginning, recommend they look at the ex-husband from the new girlfriend, and then I'm going to slow play Jeff. I'm going to wait for them to ask about it. I'm not going to bring him up, because the fact that she actually was trying to frame him, you don't want to blurt it out too quickly. You know who you should check out is Jeff. Definitely Jeff. And then in your head, like, uh-oh, that sounded pretty bad. Dang it, I rushed it. So I think she knew, I'm going to quickly say the ex-husband, but really I'm going to slow play Jeff. And it turned out to be a pretty decent strategy. The way Jeff comes up, which we'll get to, did come up pretty naturally, and then Wendi got to just respond after it was brought up, and you can tell from that moment when it's brought up and she responds to it, that's the direction that the detectives latch on to. You can just feel it, that's what they want to know about. And so in that case, I would say that's the most successful part of Wendi's whole strategy and interrogation, is that did come up naturally and she commented on it, but her weaknesses, which are she doesn't have the impulse control to just shut up about it, she ends up kind of ruining it because it came up pretty good and natural, and then she just can't keep her trap shut, and she just beats the point over the head and goes, he's a great suspect. I can see why you guys would think he's a great suspect. Oh, we're about to talk about a new possible lead, Jeff, and it just starts sounding pretty bad. But let's not get ahead of myself. So we're working through, the first section was, so what's your story today? She makes it through that pretty good. Then the second section is, do you know who would do this? And this one's a little bit tough because every answer comes up, my family. My family again. Yep, that would probably be my family. Hated him the most as well. And it starts not to sound all that great. And so after she goes on about, you know who I would look at? If you're looking for someone, I would check out the ex. And then at that point is possibly the first time the interrogator puts a little bit of pressure on, and he says, okay, at this point, we would like to take your cell phone and download everything on it and look at it and have that. Is that okay? And then they wait for the answer, because if she goes, no, I don't want to do that, then okay, now we're at a different direction. But the Adelsons knew that was going to happen, so of course, no problem. Let's do it. Okay. Here's the absurdity about how her family keeps coming up as the people that the realistic answer to all these questions of who do you think would do it. And so how do you handle that if you're Wendi? Well, what she does is she tries, I think the strategy is she tries to meet it head on. So if the detective goes, who do you think would hate Dan enough to do this? And she goes, well, my family hated him enough to do this, but they would never. And her only answer to all of those questions is to just change the inflection in the word never or ever. Like, they would never. Oh, Charlie, he would never, ever do that in a million years. Never. But that's really all she's got, is just desperately and frantically changing the inflection. Never. Someone could make a really funny video of all the times she said that and then splice it in with Charlie getting convicted and the mom being arrested. Like, my family would never. Charlie, you have been found guilty of all charges. My family would never. Donna has been arrested at the airport trying to move to Vietnam. Never. But where the impulse control that she doesn't have kicks in is she goes, they would never do anything. And then it's like, okay, and there's no really prying from the investigators. But then she'll do this thing where she goes, I'm just really scared that I have a lot of friends, and I don't know, I'm just really scared that one of them may have done this, not because they hate Dan, but because they think it would support me and it would be good. Okay. And then the interrogator goes, so do you think someone would do this without asking? And she goes, no. It's like, what, Wendy? You just said that you were scared that someone did this without asking. And then they go, okay, well, do you think someone would? And she goes, no, definitely not. And then it's like, well, the only people that really have any motives are your family. Do you think they would do it? Not in a million years. They would never, ever. And instead of just saying, no, I don't think so, that's crazy, she just goes on, and she goes, my brother, he made this joke about buying a hitman, and I repeated it to the TV repair guy. It's such a mean thing to say. I'm sorry. She sounds like a little kid. And the detective is like, that's all right. And I said it on the last video, I think while she keeps bringing up that joke, my brother made this joke, he would never, but he did joke, and I joked about it, is because she slipped up and told her ex-boyfriend Jeff, late night talking in bed, my brother looked into hiring a hitman to kill Dan. And so at that moment, they're thinking, all right, not only do we have to explain, once he brings that up, we have to explain, yeah, it was a joke. He's just talking about the joke. But also, now that he's against us and he knows we're going to go after Dan, or possibly could, we got to get rid of him too. Totally psycho move by the Adelsons, but, they are who they are. All right, let's see where we're at. Man, okay. So she makes it out, sort of the second chapter of the interrogation, which is, who else would do this? And it doesn't go as smooth as the first chapter, because she goes, my family would have reason to do this, but they would never. But I'm scared someone did it. Would someone do it? No. Oh, okay. Well, that's something. And then we get into chapter 3 of the interrogation, which they leave with their phone. At this point, the interrogator is running around with a chicken with his head cut off, because there's so much to do. They tow her car there. They need to get her car searched. She hands over her cell phone. He rushes that out of the room to get that going. They're trying a million different things. And one thing, Wendy really wants to be marked off as a suspect. As you can imagine, that would be a great feeling. And so she goes, can I go to the bathroom? And they go, yeah, hold on a second, you can't leave yet. And she goes, seriously? Okay, I'll hold it. And she goes, they go, we just have to eliminate everything. And Wendy just goes, I'm so sad. All right, it doesn't really sound. But now that they got her phone, they ask her things that they can get her answer to, that they can immediately check the phone and see if it all matches up. So they ask her last personal contact with him, the last conversation they had with him. They go back almost through her full story again. She's talking, I thought a tree fell. I just thought it was a tree. And she goes, do you know anything about her ex? And she goes, no. And she goes, well, she's 50, but she's still pretty. You can still be pretty at 50. It's like, Wendy, what are you talking about? And then the gunshot residue swab person comes in because they wanted to do that before they let her go to the bathroom in case she was going to wash the gunshot residue off her. And so they come in, and Wendy turns into the stupid little girl where she goes, you have a hard job. And the gunshot residue person's like, yeah, cool, thanks. And the gunshot residue person goes, have you washed your hands since noon? And Wendy goes, no, I'm filthy. And I think it was supposed to be a joke, but it fell a little bit flat. No one really. And this is one of my favorite parts. So the interrogator comes back in, and he's going, I have to ask, was there any cheating? And she's going, no, but he was verbally abusive to me. And Wendy goes, Dan told everyone around the community I'm mentally ill. As a way to be like, can you believe that he said I was mentally ill? The woman with bulging eyes says to the homicide detective after abruptly switching from crying to laughing. No, wonder why he said that, Wendy. He told everybody I was mentally ill. He was mean. And let's see, anything else with this one? She ends that one again where it's like maybe the way she brought up Amy's the new girlfriend's ex-husband, but the way she tries to reiterate as things are coming to an end, she goes, only thing that I can think of is Amy's ex-husband. And then that's the end of the third little chapter section. Then the fourth one is called the victim advocate. So again, the interrogator's in and out of the room a bunch, and they bring in this victim advocate, and this is really where Wendy starts to sound really bad, and this is why silence in interrogations is golden, because the victim advocate comes in, and it's her job to comfort Wendy, to start figuring out how are we going to tell his parents, Dan's parents, how are we going to tell your boys, how are we going to pick up your boys from school, can we get a friend here to comfort you? But other than that, the witness or the victim advocate is kind of just sitting in there with them, and there's a lot of silences, and Wendy starts filling the silences with some pretty bizarre sounding monologues. And again, just on full manipulation mode, she comes in, and Wendy goes, I'm usually a lot more fun. And then Wendy goes, I have that skirt, it's pretty. And then this is where Wendy starts talking about how I'm a suspect, but I'm not actually a suspect, but I understand I'm a suspect. And listen to this, quote, I get why I would be a suspect, but the idea that I would ever do anything, I understand they need to check, but I don't know who would do this, though. I could see why they would think it was me. And the victim advocate is just like, all right, I get that. And then I think Wendy realizes, okay, this isn't going too great, and she goes back into manipulation mode and goes, I feel like we look a little bit alike. Do you see this as you're looking at me? You have very pretty blue eyes. And the victim advocate is going, no, yours are much bluer than mine. And Wendy goes, but I feel like I'm looking at my sister. It's like, you've been talking to this lady for 10 minutes and you're already forming a sisterhood? She's just complimenting, and she always compliments herself in a way after. She's like, do you see yourself? You really are pretty. You look exactly like me. I think you're beautiful. You almost have as blue eyes as I do. You're not quite as pretty, but you're all right. And I think she's just trying to get the witness advocate on her side. Then they come in and ask, is it okay if we search your car? Again, if she says no, it's going to send everything in a different direction. She says yes, okay. And then this is probably the worst that Wendy has sounded up until this point. She's just kind of rambling through silences going, I understand why I'm a suspect. I guess I'm not a suspect. I understand why you would think I would do this, but not you. And the witness advocate just goes, right. Okay, what do you even say to that? This woman's just mumbling about how she's understandably not a suspect, but definitely a suspect. It's like, okay. And at that point, the witness or the victim advocate goes, okay, I'm going to call a bunch of friends. We're going to get one to go pick up your kids and one to come down here and comfort you, and leaves the room. And I don't think Wendi knows what to do with herself in the empty room again, so she just starts sobbing and fake crying. Oh yeah, I got to make sure I do this at the end. This definitely deserves a big lie cry, but I'm watching my friend's dog. The dogs are both sleeping right now, and if I toot the horn, they're both getting up, so I got to do it at the end. All right, and now the fifth portion of this long interrogation. They bring her social worker friend named Jane in the room. Jane comes down, they contact her, and Jane is pretty much wrong about everything. First, Jane comes in and goes, can we get a blanket for Wendi? She comes in like she's really somebody. Can we get a blanket? This room is freezing. Wendi here is shivering. Let's get a blanket. She's really throwing her social worker weight around when she first gets in here. And then they're just sitting in there, and the victim advocate is in there, and Jane, the friend, actually brings up Jeff. That's what I was talking. Jeff comes up naturally. And so Jane goes, is Jeff this much of a lunatic? And Wendi goes, I didn't even think of Jeff. I hope to God not. And then the victim advocate, who is trained to, if something comes up in there, she is trained to pry just a little bit. So she goes, may I ask who Jeff is? And Jane, the social worker, goes, yeah, I think that you should. I think that Wendi's been seeing a guy called Jeff who's jealous. And then at that point, they paint Jeff as a jealous, pathetic loser who is creepy and a lunatic. And at a certain point, the victim advocate goes, okay, I'm going to go get the detective so you can tell him who Jeff is. And Jane, the social worker friend, goes, yeah, I think you should do that. And they're definitely listening to the interrogation in the other room. They're watching and listening. And right at that moment, I think it's the biggest win that Wendi had the whole time. It definitely does send them down the Jeff direction. And you got to think that's a little bit away from the Adelson. So that was a win if you're Wendi. But the fact that Jane brought it up and then Wendi just got to respond, do you think so? Well, he is a jealous, pathetic loser. You're right. What if he did do it? And so then the detective comes back in. They let Wendi go to the bathroom, and there's this little moment between the detective and the social worker friend, Jane, and you can tell the detective is like, okay, this is something, I think. And Jane is going, you need to look into Jeff, and you need to look into Jeff. And she goes, as a social worker, that's what I would do. And I would hope that Jane, as time went on and she realizes she was verifiably wrong, that hopefully she reached out to Jeff and had a little apology, because it just reminds me, this era that we're in right now with all of the cameras and the way it can be put on the internet forever, politicians and mainstream media heads are eating shit so hard compared to 50 years ago. If you got on TV 50 years ago or got on the radio or something and said something, an opinion, it disappeared a lot more unless someone was taping it on the internet and then took time to copy the tapes and mail them out. Pretty much everything that was said was seen once on TV or heard once on the radio. So maybe people in their heads were like, that person said that, I heard it months ago. But nowadays, the clips stay up forever. So people that were very wrong about things a year ago, those clips are up there. And a lot of times this day and age, they never comment on it. They just pretend it's not there. So I would hope, Jane, okay, you were wrong about everything, all right? Just verifiably and totally, and you sounded like a bit of a moron being that confident about it, throwing your as a social worker. And so hopefully she apologized. All right, let me see. She goes to the bathroom, And the detective is going, is she going to tell me everything about Jeff, as if Wendi has been hiding things about him? And then they bring in, or then the interrogator comes back in, and they basically end the last little bit asking Wendi about Jeff. And she paints Jeff as a jealous loser that has a totally run-down car and an embarrassing basement apartment. I also was picturing Jeff, because he got to watch her interrogation, I think even before we all did. So imagine her being like, yeah, his car is very run down. And then it cuts to Jeff. I don't have a car payment. It runs great. Why would I get a new one to impress a psycho like you? And then she goes, he has an embarrassing basement apartment. He goes, cuts to him, I'm saving up to buy a house, lady, Jesus. And she paints Jeff as a jealous guy that flipped out on her because she was cheating, which I think it's come out she was cheating with a lot of dudes. I think she was just giving Jeff just enough love and affection so he would help her with the kids, and she could sit back and relax, and the kids have someone, a father type figure to look up to. But every chance she got, she would ignore Jeff and go down to Miami and sleep with a bunch of dudes and have a crazy time. And so I don't think she was really totally in with Jeff. And it kind of just ends abruptly. You don't get to see the total end, but it was a 5 hour and 5 minutes we get to see, and I think the whole thing was 6 hours, and I think she was there for 9 hours. And I think there are parts where, if I could give the detectives one criticism, it's don't let her off the hook. When it starts to get weird and she's going, I really think, one point, the dumbest suggestion that Wendi has the whole time is almost at the very end. I want to get the words exactly right, or maybe it's not going to be worth trying to find it. But she goes, I'm just really scared someone crazy or deranged did this because they thought it would be good. And let's break that down a little bit. Okay, so anytime it comes up that maybe her family did it, do you think your family did this? They have reason to do it. No, never, not in a million years. Which she also comes off really desensitized to the thought of her mom and brother doing this. It's not like, what? Are you kidding me? You think my mom did this? Think about how absurd that would sound if her family actually didn't do it. Yeah, it was my mom. She sits in the chair and reads all day, and then she decided, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to use my crime connections to hire a hit. Yeah, that sounds realistic. No, it wasn't my mom. Trust me, it wasn't my mom. But then, okay, but your family has all this reason to do it and hated him more than anyone else. Do you think they would have? Not in a million years. So who do you think would do it? And she goes, I'm scared a crazy, deranged person that I got a lot of friends. I'm scared that one of them would do it because they want to support me. And it's like, let's break that down, Wendi. Okay, so how many people total does Wendi know? And then how many of those know her divorce well enough, all the little parts of her divorce well enough to know that it was horrible? Probably not all that many. And statistically, if out of those people, how many are going to be truly crazy and deranged enough to think, you know what? I love that Wendi person so much. Wendi's going, so many people love me that maybe someone did this just because they wanted to support me. And how do you even explain the intricacies of your terrible divorce to a deranged person? I was picturing Wendi going, okay, so at that point, then we decided we're getting divorced. And the deranged person's going, and Wendi's going, listen, I know you're deranged, but I got a lot to explain with this whole thing. So if you could just please try to listen and be a little less deranged. So I got to get a lot out so you understand this whole thing. The deranged person goes home, and he has pictures of Wendi and Dan, and everything's connected with yarn, and there's writing on all the walls, and and so Wendi is trying to say, no, my family, that their main hobby was hating Dan, and they're all legitimate psychos. They would never, never do anything like that in a million years. Okay, so who do you think would? Maybe a crazy deranged person, because so many people love me. Statistically, there's probably going to be some deranged person out there, and I think that it was probably them. It's like, nah, that sounds pretty stupid, Wendi. But she makes it through. And since then, the hitmen, the person that connected the hitmen to her family, her brother, and her mom have all gone down for it. Do you think Wendi's going to? That is the burning question. We'll see how everything turns out. Real quick, I wanted to give my dad wrote a children's book, and then my mother-in-law illustrated it, but it's called The Lamb and the Boy. It's a true story from my dad's childhood. That's them. My dad's, his bio is Rod Sharp was born on a ranch in northeastern Colorado and graduated from Colorado State University. And my mother-in-law's bio is she lived and worked in New York City for many years. She is now traveling the world and illustrating books. But it's a solid book. If you got kids in the ages 3 to 7, I think it would be a good buy. Good themes like hard work pays off, be nice to animals. These days, some of the children's books have pretty weird messages and stuff. But check it out. I'll put a link to buy it in the description. That's going to do it for the show this year. I love you all so much. Thanks for supporting me and my family. I really do appreciate it. So I will see you next year. Why? Stiving why? Shamita. Hey folks, realized I forgot the official Lie Cry Horn. Can't end the year like that. So here's the official Wendi Adelson Lie Cry. There we go. See you later.